A lot of authors come to us because they're too busy to market their own books, and we could offer them a package that, yeah, I mean, like gets them the Amazon bestseller tag or like gets them some Amazon ratings. But is that actually going to do anything that is in line with what they intended for that book? Your book is not going to accomplish what you want for you unless you actually put some elbow grease into it, or spend a fortune. And I mean, it's going to be a fortune if you're not willing to put any elbow grease yourself in.
Yeah. And how big is a big enough list?
It's never big enough. That's, I mean, don't be afraid just to get started with 100 people. I like to think about Amazon ads versus other platforms as like, skiing versus snowboarding. Skiing is way easier to learn, but way harder to master. Snowboarding is way harder to learn, but way easier to master.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have Alex Strathdee with us. Alex is the founder of Shelf Life, where his team helps authors get their books in the hands of real people. After working on over 1,000 books in over 50 nonfiction niches, Alex wanted to know what advice he could give his authors whose books weren't selling about why they weren't selling. He's the author of Before the Bestseller, which just came out in March. Alex, it's so great to have you on the show.
Stephan, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so let's first of all talk about your origin story, your superhero origin story. How did you end up where you are now, running an agency and just having figured out a lot about the Amazon algorithm?
Depends how much time you got. I graduated Virginia Tech, go Hokies, was a software salesman, also known as a sales engineer. So I'd build demos, and it was the perfect life that I did not want. Very bored. Didn't feel like I was using my talents to their fullest extent. So quit that. Had a family member that worked for American Airlines, had free flights around the world. So I used up about $16,000 worth of free flights, flying first class to like Brazil and all these different fun places. And then COVID hit. And so I, during that time, had started going and worked for an indie publisher just to make a little money on the side. Just like as her online VA while I was traveling, and learned through her that authors don't really know how to market their books. And it was an experience I had personally when I released a book back in 2018, actually with that indie publisher. And when I released that book, it's the journey that a lot of authors face, which is where they sign up for a marketing package, like an Amazon bestseller, package, and they spend $5,000 to $10,000 on that package. Unfortunately, some spend even more, and they think, "Oh, wow, I'm going to be an Amazon bestseller. That means I've made it." And then they launch their book, and they find out that that doesn't actually mean anything for bringing real people into your world, reading your books. Most of the Amazon bestseller stuff is just a scam. And I realized, I remember during that journey that book marketing is hard. You actually have to, do it. And so when I realized it wasn't just me facing that problem, it was this whole group of, pretty much every author out there, unless you're, James Clear, is facing the issue of book marketing. And so it just became my focus and the problem that I really wanted to solve on behalf of authors. And, we're having some pretty good success at that now. I've got a great team around me. And that's what I wake up and do every day is I help authors get their books in the hands of real people.
Yeah, and you came highly recommended. I learned about you from Dr. Ben Hardy. He's a client of yours, and he just sang your praises. I was looking at just an Amazon expert, like advertising expert, that I could bring on board to help with a book project that my wife is going to put out, Orion. She's got children's book series that she's working on, and your name came up. He was adamant. Ben was that this is the guy for you. So I'm glad that we're doing this interview now, and we'll hopefully be working together soon. I also would love to get a sense for what else you do besides Amazon, and how this all fits into the bigger puzzle of book marketing.
Well, I appreciate the kind praise, and I thought the same thing when Steve said, "Hey, this guy Stephan wants to have you on the podcast." I was like, "Wait, like Stephan Spencer? Like this guy is one of the marketing greats. He's interviewed everyone from Neil Patel to Jay Abraham." So so I appreciate being on here. I'm humbled to be here. I think of book marketing like building a house, and your roof is the amount of copies that you sign up to get into the wild when you start, right? Like, and there's different numbers you can go with. Rob Fitzpatrick, he's the author of Write Useful Books, really great book on writing nonfiction, useful nonfiction. Also wrote the Mom Test. He makes six figures, a month from his books. Very accomplished author. He says that you need to seed 1,000 copies into the wild, into a community of people who know each other in order for a book to take off. On the other end, the late Bill Gladstone, who was the literary agent to people like Eckhart Tolle, Jack Canfield, Marie Kondo, his whole thing is that you needed to get 20,000 copies into the wild in order for a book to become commercially successful. And so the truth is the number is between 1,000 and 20,000. And how serious you are about your book is how you pick your number. So if this is just like a flash in the pan project, you just wanted to get a book out there, then make your goal 1,000. And if this is your next thing for the rest of your life, and you really care about it, then your number should be 20,000, right? So how serious you are about your book is how you set your number. And then once you have your number, then you need to figure out, okay, how am I going to break that number up into the different book marketing methods of getting books in the hands of real people? And so that's, this is the problem a lot of authors have, is they have this goal of how many books they're going to move, but they don't actually have any idea how they're going to get to that number. So this is the way of building your house, where the walls are Amazon ads, the front door of the house is Meta ads, the windows are reader seating, finding organizations and events that have your ideal reader as their attendee and as their members, and get copies in their hands. There's a whole bunch of different ways to get books in the hands of real people, and that's what we're focused on. Is whenever we're focused on a method that doesn't actually get a book in the hand of someone real, whose problem you're solving for, then it's not something that we care about. Also known as like an Amazon bestseller tag. We don't do Amazon bestseller campaigns because they don't actually do anything for the author besides make them feel warm and fuzzy for about 5 minutes until they realize they've overpaid for something. So that is our focus. And right now, the three ways that we are really focused on is reader seeding. So like I said, finding organizations, events across the country that have your ideal readership, and getting copies distributed to the attendees. It's a great way to get like 500 copies in the hands of people at once. And then the Amazon ads, which I know we'll dive deep into, and then Meta ads obviously are always a good way to do that. So those are the three different sort of areas that we are heavily focused on right now.
Right. So reader seating, that's where you find events where your ideal reader will be attending, and it's enough of an audience that it's more than maybe 100 people, maybe 500,000 or thousands of people. And you're gifting the book to all the attendees? You're working a deal with the event organizer? How does that work?
Yeah, it's exactly it. And a lot of people will hear that and say, "Whoa, I have to give away my book for free." And it's like, unless you already have an audience of a couple thousand, or you're like I said, James Clear or something. Like, yes, like you got to remember if you want the success of James Clear, you got to realize that is a top 0.0001% like example, right? Like everyone thinks that they don't realize the work that actually goes into how he got there, right? I think it's just like, oh, maybe my book will just take off magically like this. And it's like, your book can't take off magically if people haven't read it. And if you're a first-time author, and if you're expecting people to come buy your book, you got to realize that you're not just asking people to take a risk on spending the money. You got to convince them to spend the time to open the book. And so if you can remove the money part, then all you have to do is you still got to convince them to open the book and read it. So that's where a lot of authors, I think, go wrong. Is like, I get it. You're this accomplished CEO, or you're this accomplished, individual who's done a lot, and people should flock to your book. But if they don't know who you are, they're not going to be willing to both part with their money and their time in order to maybe take a chance on you. And so, like Joseph Noyen of Don't Believe Everything You Think, it's one of the top selling books right now. We've been fortunate enough to work with him for going on 2 years now. He is, I think he might currently be on the New York Times list, or if not, he is. He's currently he's on the top 20 on the Amazon charts. I do know that, which Amazon charts do matter. I know he was recently on the New York Times list. He gave away 20 to 30,000 free copies of that book, and PDFs, physical copies, to make that book how it is. He did it over the course of a couple of years because obviously that is a big investment. But yeah, reader seating. I know I just went on, got up all on my high horse there, and went on my monologue about reader seating. But yes, essentially that is reader seating. Is that way you're taking the friction of money out of the equation. All you have to do is convince people of their time.
Yeah. So one thing we talked about before the recording was that you were happy to give away free copies of your book before the bestseller, like physical copies with the shipping included, to listeners. And I just thought, wow, that is super generous. And now it makes total sense. Yes. Very strategic of you.
Your audience doesn't know me. I mean, they're kind enough. They're obviously a fan of yours, and so I get to borrow a little bit of your clout here. But yeah, I mean, by no means are they ready to go spend money on my book, and so that's why I'm saying, I know it's going to help them. I'll ship it to them for free, so they don't have to spend any of their money on it. And that's as an early author, who until people start hearing of you in like 3 or 4 places, like you got to hustle.
Yeah. Yeah. So doing this for hundreds or maybe even 1,000 copies is just kind of the cost of doing business as an author these days, right?
Jeff Bezos, he sourced I think $1 million in his first round when he was building Amazon. And that's like a top 0.000, I mean, it's like one of the top 10 companies right in the world, right? In terms of revenue generated. You got to realize if that's what you're going for, you need investment. And a lot of authors don't realize that. Yeah, they're going to put, when you release a book, if it's just like a passion project, you just want to like get some copies in, like that's all fine. But if you want it to be like the top book in your industry, like it's going to take either time and money. You don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. There's a lot of ways you can do it that don't take money, but you got to be willing to either put time or money into the marketing of your book.
Yeah. So how does our listener or viewer get a free copy of your book before the bestseller?
Yeah, absolutely. Just shoot me an email, alex@getshelflife.com. Getshelflife.com is our website. We also have all of our podcast episodes before the bestseller, where we interview authors who have sold over 10,000 copies, which it's how I learned about book marketing, was interviewing all those people. So shoot me an email, alex@getshelflife.com, and I will make sure that you get a copy shipped to your address for free.
That's awesome. So I wonder if there's a strategy out there of bundling a book where you're trying to get discovered with another author who is shipping their own books. So for example, a client of mine, the Tuttle twins, Connor Boyack. So we helped him with some SEO, and we connected him up with a great web design firm. He did a website redesign with Studio One, which Greg Merrilies has been on the podcast multiple times. In fact, we just aired an episode on the show deconstructing the redesign of the Tuttle Twins website. And so Connor has sold 6 million copies of his book series now. So 6 million books, and a lot of those are they're handled internally. They're not going through Amazon, but through their own warehouses and whatever. Like they sell a lot of copies through their own website. So it just occurred to me while we were talking, like I wonder if I could bundle my wife's the children's book with Tuttle Twins orders. If they get a free bonus, the customer, and I, make it a compelling deal for Connor as well. I don't know. Is that a thing? Is that something that authors ever do?
I love that you're getting ideas from this, and I say try it. It's not something I've specifically heard of, but that is what this takes. Is it takes creative marketing, and creative marketing is the best. That's your highest leverage point, is doing something in a way that hasn't previously been done. And so I love the ideation.
Yeah, awesome. I'll talk to Connor about that. Now, you have some really prestigious authors. You've name dropped a couple of them that are clients of yours, and there's some great testimonials on your website. What are some examples from the 1,000+ clients that you've worked with, authors that have done outside the box thinking and really creative marketing?
We actually got event seating from Dan Heath. So, I mean, giving away copies to event attendees are not new. But we were, we essentially sold it as okay, with Joseph Nguyen, he's given away 20 to 30,000 copies of his book. And so, at first we were just going one by one on LinkedIn or using a polo to reach out to people saying, hey, you want a free book? And that is really freaking hard. The response rates and it might take you 10 years to seed 1,000 copies, right? So we're like, okay, what are higher leverage points? And then, Dan Heath, we were reaching out to people, and someone got back to us and was like, "Oh, I run the SHRM, which is like a national, HR organization." And they're like, "Oh, well, because we were doing reader seating for Dan Heath, just reaching out to one by one for people to get his book for free." And this is Dan Heath. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and he's doing reader seating, right? Like, I mean, if you think that you're above, giving away free copies of your book, here's an example of a New York Times author who's doing this for his latest launch.
Yeah, I mean he's got an impressive track record, and his and his brother Chip's book Made to Stick is a must read, right?
Yeah. There's a lot we got from that we discuss internally as a team. Like Commander's Intent is like something that we talk about as a company now, and we got that from his book.
Yeah, actually, could you elaborate just for a minute on what that is for our listener who hasn't read his book?
Yeah, Commander's Intent was my biggest takeaway from that book, and I don't think it was the biggest takeaway Dan meant for me to have, or Chip meant for the reader to have. But as a company, a message. It's basically a message that stories help messages stick, right? Like a no one remembers like a bit of advice. They remember the story that feeds that advice, right? For example, the difference between teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, versus like the alternative is telling someone, oh, learn a skill and you'll be blessed, right? Like people don't remember that. People remember the teach a man to fish quote, right? So like people remember stories. So first of all, that's like a big part of the message in the book. And so one of the stories that he tells is about how in the 1950s the US government basically knew that whenever they go into a battle, their commanders, the battle plan, like what is it? They'd say like the only battle plan that stays true is the one that hasn't actually been to battle yet. So the second they go into battle, the battle plan would go amiss, and they wouldn't end up coming away with their intention. And so what they came up with was Commander's Intent, where the commander had to give their squad basically what is the number one objective that we want to take away from this mission. And so, that way they weren't getting into battle like, oh, what do we do? It's like, okay, remember the objective. Here's what we're doing. If things go wrong, it doesn't matter. This is the number one thing. And so, we train our team to think that way, where, like, let's, for example, a team member might run into an issue like, oh, I don't know how to respond to this client. It's like, okay, our mission is to make our clients as happy as possible. So you don't need to wait for a response, or you don't need to ask a question from a fellow team member to go and make that customer happy. Just answer that question of like, wait, what do I do? Okay, well, think through what is going to be the best result for the customer. So answer it that way, and initiate something. It's basically a way for us to get our team to act autonomously, to think things through and be more proactive in how they tackle issues, instead of a million questions flying back and forth between the leadership team and whatever have you. So Commander's Intent was a huge takeaway for me from that book.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Now, I was interrupting you, and you were going to go off and talk about something else, and I made you go back to the Made to Stick book. So please continue with where you were taking us.
Oh, and you could send me on so many different rabbit holes. I love monologuing, Stephan, so be careful. With Reset, we essentially, we realized we saw when we got it in response from this SHRM leader. He was like, I have this event of 150 people. Could we get copies for all of them? I was like, wait a second, there's something here. Like, what if we could reach out to event organizers across the country and get our books in the hands of all of their people? And so, immediately we're like, that's a way higher leverage point. And we turned around and we started doing that, with one of our clients who wrote a really phenomenal book called Fuse Pathways, which is about bringing together science and art. He's a famed inventor named Paul Kirby. And so, we just got him an event with, 700 attendees. And, I'm amazed the event organizer is about to receive 50 boxes of books for 700 attendees to his garage. And I'm grateful that he wants to store those in his garage until the event. But that's what we're talking about is and that's how we figured out, oh wow, like event seating is so we only just started offering event seating, just because we're having such great success with it so far. Trying to send some bookmarks as well with the boxes of books. But yeah, we found event seating to be a really effective strategy at the moment.
Yeah, and it doesn't require that the author come and speak at the event.
No, yeah, the author doesn't have to do anything. Yeah, they just get and that's the thing is like for authors come to us. A lot of authors come to us because they're too busy to market their own books, and we could offer them a package that, yeah, I mean, like gets them the Amazon bestseller tag or like gets them some Amazon ratings. But is that actually going to do anything that is in line with what they intended for that book, which is either elevating their brand, elevating their getting leads for their business, or even just spreading word of mouth over the book? Like no. And so like that's our focus is we want to be the first. I mean, to be honest, I think we're pretty much the only people who are actually focused on getting books in the hands of real people and figuring out what are the best, most cost effective ways to actually help an author move towards their goal of getting that book to do what they wanted to do for them.
Yeah. Let's talk about the approach that a lot of folks are taking, which is to try to game the Amazon system, the bestseller system with buying groups and doing a bestseller campaign. Why don't you explain in more detail what exactly that entails and why it's not really legit?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the buying groups, but I get the concept. I've just never actually engaged with any of it myself, so I've never tested it but I can speak to the fundamentals as to some of the things that you probably want to be careful about if you are doing that strategy. At the end of the day, the only thing, there's no such thing as like a free lunch in terms of your book is not going to accomplish what you want for you unless you actually put some elbow grease into it, or spend a fortune. And I mean, it's going to be a fortune if you're not willing to put any elbow grease yourself in. So when it comes to any way that you think you can game a system, especially Amazon, either it might only be temporarily, and or it might actually hurt your book. So like for example, there's a platform called Pubbie out there, Pubbie.co, which is for Amazon ratings. Highly recommend you stay away from it, especially as a nonfiction author, because Amazon is a recommendation engine. That's where they're different from like say Meta or Instagram. People are actually on Amazon to buy books. And so Amazon doesn't just make money when an ad is clicked, they also make money when someone purchases a book. And so it's in their best interest to show the right book to the right person. And one of the pieces of data that they look at most closely when deciding who to show your book to is who has reviewed your book. So if you're a nonfiction author and you're using Pubbie to get reviews for your book, then what you're doing is, and a majority of the people who do reviews on Pubbie are fiction readers. You're getting a bunch of fiction people to read your book. What is that going to tell Amazon? It's going to tell them that your book is for fiction readers. It's going to confuse the algorithms. If you try to run Amazon ads, they're not going to work. And so you got to realize that everyone who you're getting to buy your book on that platform, especially your first 1,000 readers, need to be your ideal reader persona. And that's why I say like mom's purchase doesn't count, or like, your sister, sibling, or kids, if they're buying your book and they usually read like romance or fiction or kids books, that is going to confuse the heck out of the algorithms. And so like, you think, oh, I'm getting a sale, but I mean, I also think that, those first 1,000 copies, it's not going to do you any good anyway if it's like your friend buying your book who has no interest in the topic, because there's no chance of them recommending the book to anyone else. If you're not actually solving their problem. Now, if you're like Joseph Nguyen, and this is part of why his book has taken off, is because his book is really for everyone. If you're not solving their problem, they're not going to actually learn from the book, and they're not going to be in that community of people who are actually facing the issue that you're trying to solve. And so really, that's why we're so focused on getting your book in the hands of the right people, especially out of the gates, because it helps, then when word of mouth spreads, you're spreading to the right people. They're buying your book on Amazon, you're sending the right message to Amazon. So I don't know who's in these buying groups. If it is a bunch of people who usually do read in your genre, then sure, go for it. But if it's like you got children's book authors in there, you got fiction book authors in there, and you're a nonfiction author, then I would highly recommend staying away from that.
Yeah, makes total sense. Right. And so is there a way that you recommend for getting real, legit Amazon reviews from your ideal reader avatar and not just from the great unwashed?
Yeah, absolutely. I can go through a few of them. So one of the best things you can do when you are starting your author journey, if you don't have an email list yet, because an email list is where you're going to get those starting reviews, right? And so there's a guy named Tim Grohl who wrote a book called Your First 1,000 Copies. I don't know if you might have read it, Stephan. It is a phenomenal book about if you don't have a list, and I repeat a lot of the stuff that, I repeat some of the stuff that he writes about in my book, because it is just such great advice. And I attribute it to him, of course. He says, like, go and ask, the people around you on LinkedIn, Facebook, just send a message. Hey, I'm writing about X topic. I'm exploring this topic on a weekly 3-2-1 newsletter. Love the 3-2-1 format, which we can get into if you want. Do you want to be on my list? And that's one of the best ways you can get people who are interested in your topic, and build that list quickly. Do that until you're at like 100, 200, a list of 100, 200 people. And that's where you're going to get your first like 10, 15, 20, ideal reviews. Now you're asking them, and like I've done this before. I've done this tactic before, and you're going to get people who write back and just say, no, thanks. And that's fine. Like, you just got to be willing to get rejected, and people, they're your friends. They're not going to be mean about it. But even like, just loose acquaintances, like that person you went to high school with, right? Who you haven't spoken with in 20, 30 years. Like, just, hey, I'm writing about this topic. And you'd be surprised how many of those people will actually say yes. I actually find there's a higher rate amongst those. And again, like, that's why you're telling them, hey, I'm writing about this topic. Are you interested? If they're not interested, meaning they're not your ideal reader, they'll say no. You don't want them on your list anyway. You want people who are your ideal reader, right? So that's how you're going to initially build that email list. That's going to be really, really useful for then getting reviews when you release your book. So having an email list, getting reviews from your email list is a great way. If you are at the point where you're starting to get traction with your book and people are reaching out to you via email saying, hey, absolutely love your book, it's really fantastic. One of the mistakes authors make is they respond and say, oh, that's great. Can you leave a review? And there's two problems with that. The reader first doesn't know what to write. And secondly, they don't know where to leave the review. And so whenever someone is reaching out to you and singing your praise in an email, instead of getting right to asking them for a review, say, oh, what was your favorite part of the book? And that way, instead of, they're essentially writing the review without knowing it. They're writing it, and they're doing it because they just want to share, their specific, they want to share with you as the author what they liked about it. And then once they send that to you, oh, that's really great. Give some context about, why you added that part or whatever. And then say, could you actually copy and paste that right here in this link and send them the exact link to your review page on Amazon, which is a very specific link. And, just say, hey, can you copy and paste that here? And that overcomes those two challenges of people not knowing what to write and where to leave the review. So if you're starting, obviously, if you don't have people emailing you about whether or not they like your book, then, your first problem is just getting started, which again, that's when we talked about the email strategy. But once you get traction and people are reaching out to you saying they love the book, then, that's a good strategy to make sure you're converting as many of those people into reviews as possible.
Yeah. And how big is a big enough list?
It's never big enough. That's, don't be afraid just to get started with 100 people. Like, that's, that's one of the biggest mistakes people make early on, is they're just so focused on getting 10,000 subscribers that they're not focused on getting their first 100. And once you have 100, then your next goal is 200. For my first 1,000 subscribers, I manually added them. And the way that I did that is every single conversation I was having, at the end of that conversation, I would say, oh, I write about this stuff, what's your email? Let me add you to it. Another way to start your list, I did this as well. We'd already had a business around for a bit. And so I just reached out to, all my current and past clients and just said, hey, I'm going to start writing about book marketing. Like, do you want to be on the list? And I think I built up to around 150 that way, to get my list started. And this was like, 4 or 5 years ago. But I manually added my 600th. I manually added my 800th. I was basically just anyone who I talked to about book marketing. I'm like, hey, let me get your email. And so, I'd focus more on, I don't know if I was to say like a good list is 50,000, you'd hear that and be like, oh crap, I'm never going to get there. Like, wherever you are in your list journey, just be super diligent about collecting those emails, with whoever you talk to. And if 100 is all you can muster for the time being, then 100 is perfect. If 1,000 is what you can, muster, then I think you start getting impactful book sales at around 1,000 subscribers. That's where because you're only going to convert, maybe like a good conversion rate of those might be 20%. Or that's actually a fantastic conversion rate, is getting 20% of those people to buy your book. If you have 1,000 subscribers, and the other thing to focus on is open rates, right? So like, if you have a list of 10,000, I'm sure I know you've discussed this in previous episodes with people much smarter than I am about email lists. But, if you have 10,000, 10,000 emails, but only, 1% of them are actually opening your email, I'd rather have a list of, that's 1%, that's what, 100 people opening your email. I'd rather have a list of, 1,000 people with a 50% open rate, right? That's five times the impact, and so, you can talk about some ways that you can make sure that stays high. But again, I think there's been much smarter people than I on this program that talk about email lists. So focus on really providing value, in those emails week over week.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Amazon ads, because that's an area of specialty for you guys. You're recognized, renowned in that area. What's a typical budget for the advertising spend with Amazon? What's it cost for the management fee to work with you? And how many books would a typical author that you work with sell in the beginning, first few 4 or 5 months, and then maybe later on, 6, 7, 8, 10 months later?
Yeah, great question. So the way that you can start, if the way that an author can think about whether or not Amazon makes sense, and the way to think about the game that you're playing as you go into it, is what are all the ways that you're currently getting books out, and what is your cost per reader? Your cost per acquisition of a reader, essentially. And so on Amazon, your goal is to figure out, well, what's your cost per acquisition. We have a bunch of different types of authors we work with. We work with a lot of traditionally published authors. We work with a lot of self-published authors, and everything in between. The traditionally published authors are not going to make money no matter what. You're not going to make money on Amazon ads. Your royalty rate's usually somewhere between 7 and 12%. And so as an author, if you are advertising on Amazon as a traditionally published author, and again, we have many, your goal has to be something else, whether it's like you mentioned, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. His whole thing is, he wants to drive people with his new book, Science of Scaling, into their scaling program, right? So there's got to be some sort of a back end that you're looking for there. For self-published, there are still a lot of authors who are profitable in their Amazon ads, like Joseph Nguyen, who I mentioned. But Amazon ads will never be the thing that makes your book famous by itself. Like Amazon, the days are gone where you can put a book up on, I think, like Nir Eyal's first book, Hooked. Like at first, that book was actually self-published before Penguin picked it up. I think it was Penguin. And he ran some ads. He had some early success, and you could make a name for yourself as an author on Amazon back in those days. The competition is much fiercer. Now here in 2025, most authors are competing against people who are trying to get leads from their book, and so the cost per click, where it used to be like 20, 30 cents, is now like $1, $1.50. So it's much, much harder. I'm not saying it's not possible, but if you are going to be profitable on Amazon, and you need to already have some trickle of organic sales coming in from elsewhere, and you need to be self-published, so your royalty rates are higher. For those authors as well, it's a flywheel effect. When Amazon sees that people want your book, it's kind of artificially inflating your landing page's conversion rate, right? If a bunch of people who you're sending traffic, if you're just sending Amazon ad traffic to your listing, maybe you're going to get 1 in 10 people who visit your page to buy your book. If you're on a podcast and 20 people hear about your book and go buy your book on Amazon, maybe 15 will actually follow through with the sale. And that's a much higher conversion rate of the people visiting your listing who are actually buying the book. And so that's indicating to Amazon, oh, wow, like this is a really high impact listing. If we just all we need to do is show this to more people, and we're going to get more sales. And so that's why it's so important to have organic sales and be driving traffic to your own listing, is because then Amazon sees it and they're like, oh, wow, we should show their ads more because they have such a high conversion rate when the people get to their listing, right? And so that's why it's really important to understand that the Amazon game, like anyone who's just thinking, oh, I'm going to build my whole marketing house, bringing this full circle back to the beginning of our conversation where we talked about, the house as a marketing analogy. Anyone who's looking for Amazon to be the only thing for their book marketing, it's not going to work. And so, and there's always the asterisk, maybe 1 in a million books might work, but like for the vast majority of us, it's not going to. And so that is where organic is so important. We do not take an author unless their budget is less than, unless their budget is $1,500 or more per month on Amazon. That's like a strong budget to really start testing stuff. And that's because we do have a lot of authors who come to us and say, Amazon is kind of my primary way of marketing my book. And it's like, okay, well, then we're going to need a lot of money to start, pumping the right numbers on and getting the right data on Amazon. And if they're already getting organic sales, then usually we scale up to like a $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 budget pretty quickly. People pay us for results. If people, we have people who come to us all the time. They're like, oh, if I want to put like $500 towards Amazon, I'm like, look, we really can't help you because we're not going to be able to get results for you. Like we need some budget to start moving books on Amazon. The average author who works with us moves around 60 to 70 books per month on Amazon, which is a pretty low number, a lot lower than I think people understand. And that's because a lot of our authors are looking for leads from their books. And so those numbers make sense for them. On the higher end, like we have authors moving 10,000 plus copies per month. So don't get me wrong, there's much higher, but just being fully transparent with it, with kind of expectations, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to move hundreds of books on Amazon and I have no other marketing that I'm doing. It's like we have authors who do that. They have no, and they're paying to move books on Amazon without any other marketing going on, and that's how much you can expect to move on Amazon with that kind of a budget. When it comes to specific campaigns and how to get started, let me know, Stephan, if I'm heading in the wrong direction or you want to hear me in a different direction. If you are getting started in Amazon, just getting started and you're running your own campaigns. So let's say you're like, I don't want to pay the management fee for someone else to manage my campaigns. I don't have the money, but I do have time. I'm retired. I'm going to see what I can do with this book on Amazon. You want to start with manual campaigns until Amazon has a good idea of who your reader is. Because if you just run auto campaigns, Amazon is not going to know who your reader is. If you've sold more than 1,000 copies on Amazon, that's when I think auto campaigns start to be effective, because Amazon has enough data. Again, they're looking at your keywords, they're looking at your title, but the biggest thing they're looking at is your readers. And so auto campaigns start to kick in. Amazon starts to show your book more once they see that you have readers and who the reader profile, their reader profile, right? Like Amazon doesn't let you target based on someone's reader preferences. It just lets you pretty much, it's like very simple targeting, but they do let you run auto campaigns, which allows them to make the decisions on your behalf, right? And making those decisions on your behalf, they need good data for it. So, I'd say at least 1,000 readers before, 1,000 readers on Amazon before you start to be effective with auto campaigns. Before that, you should really focus on your manual targeting, going after products and keywords.
Got it. Okay. And you do the keyword research and all the prep work involved with that?
Yeah, I like to think about Amazon ads versus other platforms as like, skiing versus snowboarding. Skiing is way easier to learn, but way harder to master. Snowboarding is way harder to learn, but way easier to master. At least that's what the pros say. I don't know. I'm honestly just a pretty crappy skier. So, and I don't snowboard. So that the Amazon ads are kind of like the skiing. They're pretty easy to learn. So any author can pretty much get started with them. But why they're hard is because Amazon is a sales platform itself. And so, building all these other marketing tools that successfully, which is what we do, which is what influences your Amazon ads and gets your Amazon ads to perform much better. That's where you start to have have success. And so where it's easy to learn. Yeah, it's easy to just set up some product targeting some ASINs, which is like codes for books, or targeting some keywords and what people are searching for. Where it gets a little more difficult is when you start trying to like rank organically on other people's pages and like that next level, getting the right reviews, like using editorial reviews for people who you've gotten editorial reviews for. They've written their own books and you want to use that as ad text on their books. Like there's some sort of next level start, where you start to get deeper into it. And that's, so yeah, I don't want to make it out to be like oversimplified, but it is very easy to get started, but it is very hard to master.
Yeah, got it. What are some standout examples from your clients? And I know you've had some really great ones. By the way, was Nir Eyal a client of yours?
Yeah, he is, and I think we'll be working together on his next book. Yeah, we're. I actually got to go. I went to Singapore earlier this year, and actually got to go have breakfast with him, which was a really cool experience. Just sitting down with him and chatting, and we had been running ads for him for some time before that, and we just got to talk all things book marketing, which was really a cool sit down. I always love doing that. I'll fly across the world to go talk to an author that I idolize. The What was your question, Stefan?
Yeah, the standout examples of all your clients that you've worked with, like Alan Dibb, Mike McAllowitz, Nir Eyal, Ben Hardy, et cetera. So, what kind of numbers are we talking about? What did it take for them to get that kind of traction working with you?
Yeah, for Dr. Hardy, we were moving hundreds of copies a month for a cost per reader of like $2-3, so it just made sense for him. I have my wall of a lot of our top authors behind me, so this is how I like to look back and think about the different books. Alan Dibb of the One Page Marketing Plan, he's a lot of authors set up their campaigns back in like 2016, 2017, and then have been letting them run since. They're just like, yeah, they move books, but I like don't want to touch them because maybe they'll break. Well, like that's why you get an expert team in. And so like we were able to increase Alan Dibb's sales last year by 36% of the One Page Marketing Plan on Amazon, which is a pretty significant boost, and then a significant boost obviously to the back end as well. The Coaching Habit.
He's sold like a million copies or something like that.
He has, and I'll tell you, don't get me
Already.
wrong. He was successful before us. I don't want to like start a rumor that we made Alan Dibb successful. By no means, he was already successful before us. We just took his sales and then increased them by 36%, which is like a pretty big dent. But yeah, he'd already
Yeah, that's
sold
great.
like close to a million before working with us.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I've had him on the show. Like yeah, I consider him a friend. He's been on my show. I've been on his show.
He's
Yeah,
a
cool
he-
guy.
he's a fellow Aussie too, which I love. I was born in Australia and moved to the US when I was 8, so always love my fellow Aussie authors. The
Yeah.
Although you wouldn't now, I sound like a fake Australian. The Coaching Habit, MBS. We've been working with him for a few years. That book has like over 16,000 Amazon ratings now. We've been able to significantly increase his book sales year over year. The Pricing Roadmap. This is one of these authors who he actually came to. He paid a book marketing company, tens of thousands of dollars, and before he found us, and got no results. Like it was all vanity metrics, or like he was, paying for some agency to find him, opportunities, but not actually do any, enact any of them for him. And so that's where he just cut it off entirely. We were lucky to have a chat with him, and since then he's closed millions of dollars in business, from leads that have come from that book. And we're moving on the back end, I think like 200 to 400 copies of the Pricing Roadmap per month, and that's for he's at a cost. He's a self-published author, so he gets royalties back, and after you take away his book royalties, I think he's getting readers for around like $2-3 per reader. The Coaching Habit, I mean, like Alan Dibb, obviously, he's break even or better on his book. Like these are some, he's got a lot of organic stuff coming working for him too. I mean, like the Rising Leader Handbook. Holy cow! I mean, there's only so much we can do working with a book, because if the book is bad, and let's say we get 1,000 copies into the hands of people, if they do not, if it's not good, those 1,000 people aren't going to tell anyone. But when we market a really good book, it's like my favorite thing. Like, authors always say like, like they'll thank us for the work that we do, and I'll say, no, thank you for writing a really good book, because it makes our lives so much easier. Like we're able to be successful with you. And so like, the Rising Leader Handbook is one of those. I don't know what it is, but I mean, we're moving like 500-600 copies a month of this book. And it is like from an author who, I mean, he did have a hit bestseller. Mark Silverman, also like the nicest guy I've ever met. He had a hit bestseller a few years ago, and he just kind of put this book up, and he's done nothing else. And man, people are just taking to it. So, I think it's just speaks. It's perfectly speaking to his audience. Which and that's something we've talked about internally as well. Is it's difficult because we do all the marketing, but we don't control the product at all. And so we're trying to start to, the best time an author can speak to us is like, a year before, launch. We're not going to charge them anything until we get to that launch, but, just to be able to start pointing them in the right direction of like, hey, here's the search traffic, like that points towards like what you should be thinking about naming it or like how you should package it. I know you've had Pat Flynn on. I was actually just listening to your episode with Pat Flynn, or actually your
Mhm.
wife had to interview him because you had your vocal
Yeah, yeah, I lost
cords.
my voice.
That's what it was. Yeah, his and his whole thing is like you can put the meat, you can give people the message that they need, but the way that you package that message, the book cover, and the title of your book needs to be like, Advil is covered in a little sugar coated candy, right? Like you need to put it in the sugar coated candy of what people want, and then in the book you give them what they need. So that's a big part of marketing that we got to figure out a better way, because like once a book comes to us, we can't really change the title or the cover. But
Yeah, yeah, that's good stuff. Really good stuff. I know we're getting close to time here, and I want to touch on meta ads and also licensing the book to other countries and other languages and so forth. So, just to wrap up this part of the conversation, so even just breaking even, so having a self-liquidating offer where you can just funnel more and more money to Amazon advertising and make enough that you break even, that is getting more copies in the hands of potential evangelists and not just readers. So how long does it take to get that flywheel going? If we're starting, let's say today, is it 4 months from now that we'll get that traction that maybe we'll be self-liquidating? Is it 6 months? Is it 8 months?
most authors will never get to a self-liquidating standpoint. That's where a lot of the, at
Mm,
least a lot of the authors that we work with are, they're looking to sell $1 million coaching package on the back end of their book. And so I think the best thing that an author can do is make sure that your leads are trackable from Amazon. So like the great thing about self-publishing is you can upload a format to Amazon that has QR codes specific to those who are buying books on Amazon. And so, just knowing your funnel, I think is really good. If you are the point at self liquidation is a lot more difficult of a question because what matters is what else are you doing to market your book. I mentioned earlier in the conversation that Amazon loves books that have a high conversion rate on their page. So you can get there, but you have to have other robust marketing activities going on outside of Amazon in order for Amazon, it's like a rising tide floats all books, right? And it's like those that are successful, like what's the easiest way to make $1 million? Have $1 billion, right? Like it's you've got
yeah.
to be doing other things to be pushing your book in order for Amazon ads to be at that point where they're performing and well enough so that you're breaking even on your Amazon ads. So that's a
Yeah.
misconception that a lot of people have with Amazon ads, that when we hear, we have to be like, all right, we got to have this conversation again. Like here's how it works. Like I said, back in 2016, you could run some Amazon ads and pretty much guarantee that your ads are profitable. Those days are gone.
Got it. Okay. So let's move to meta advertising. How does that fit into the picture here?
Yeah, and speaking on the previous thing, that's why like Steve, you've spoken with, he's former Amazon, ran all of sales for Goodreads. We're lucky to have him on our team now. He like he'll turn away, we'll speak to maybe 40 authors in a month, and we only end up working with 5 to 10 of them because of the fact expectations is like they'll be like, all right, so I'm going to make my Amazon ads, and we're like, here's all the things you can do to market your book. When you're doing those, come back to us. Like, the Amazon ads are not going to be the thing that are going to make you profit on a book that you're not marketing in any other way. Meta ads, you'll have to talk to, maybe you'll have to have my number two on, who got me this sweet Hawaiian book marketing shirt. Laura Russum, she's our resident expert on meta ads. So she actually wrote the whole chapter in my book about meta ads, which we obviously attribute to her. So I'm not the go-to expert on meta ads. I just know obviously targeting is getting harder. It's more difficult now because you can't, because of security privileges on the iPhone, you can no longer attribute sales, which most people are buying things on their phones. So you can no longer have accurate sales. But running meta ads does help drive. Amazon loves it when you drive outside traffic towards your page, and so by running meta ads, your Amazon ads end up performing. We've seen anywhere from like 10 to 50% better, just because Amazon loves it when you drive traffic to Amazon. And so, from external sources, and for the first thing they're hitting is your book page, then they're going to reward you, in terms of better rankings and also, just sales rank overall. So meta ads, the best part of meta ads is that they work super well in combination with Amazon ads, again, because of that added traffic that you're driving to Amazon, and kind of like a scratch my back, scratch your back type thing. If you want to dive deep into like effective assets and stuff, and copy and all that, you gotta chat with Laura Russum.
So let's move for our last question to licensing. So I had Dr. Yaniv Zaid on the show not long ago, and one of his strategies is to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair and take a bunch of people, a bunch of authors, fellow authors, and he organizes to get them meetings at the Frankfurt Book Fair. And what happens for some of his clients is they get deals where they, let's say, get a royalty or a licensing fee for selling that book to a publisher or to some sort of distributor in, let's say, Vietnam or Thailand or whatever. And the book gets translated, and next thing you know, it's a bestseller, tens of thousands of copies, 100,000 copies sold in Vietnam. So he actually has sold a lot of copies of his book in Vietnam. That's pretty cool strategy if it works. And I'm curious to hear your take on that.
I think showing traction in the U.S. is how you get people interested in you. Funny enough that you asked this question a week ago. We actually got someone who submitted on our website saying, "Hey, we want to talk about foreign rights for your book." So maybe it was one of these people that you're talking about. I've never negotiated before. I told Steve, I was like, "Hey, if you want to figure it out, I'll give you 20% commission. I don't have time to figure out foreign rights. Like, go for it." So I can't really speak to that. As you've realized here, Stephan, and for everyone listening, I get really passionate about the things that I do know. And for the things that I just don't know and I'm not the expert on, I will absolutely tell you I am not the expert on that. And foreign rights is not something I know anything about.
Yeah. All right. No problem. So just before we wrap up here, if our listener is interested or viewer is interested in working with you and your company, you have that minimum budget with the media spend of $1,500 a month, but you also have a flat fee, management fee, and that's what, $1,000 a month, and it's regardless of how much you spend.
Exactly. So it's flat fee of $1,000. We manage a budget of one author's budget of $40,000 a month that he spends on Amazon ads, and we still just charge him that $1,000 fee.
That's amazing. And I heard from Steve that you actually had one author spending $100,000 a month at one point.
Steve might have gotten his numbers slightly wrong. I think maybe 60,000 is the highest we've gone in a month.
Okay. That's still a lot.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good.
It's from what we understand, and we have direct. Amazon actually now sends us leads like themselves, which is cool. That they view us that way. They sent us one client, and that's one client who has the most ad spend of anyone, and we've gone back and we've asked Amazon. We're like, hey, is anyone spending more than this person on Amazon? They're like, no, this is the top spending person on Amazon right now with their Amazon ads with books. So that was like a fun little claim to fame, is like, we are handling the biggest budget that anyone is spending on Amazon, which is kind of cool. When it comes to working with us, we do a 4-month minimum because, when authors come to us, they pay us for results. Again, we are so careful about who we take. Steve will have a conversation with you and really figure out if your expectations are aligned with what we think we can deliver for your book. We've worked with so many books, we can kind of look at the genre, look at what your current marketing mix is, and give you a pretty accurate idea of what you can expect. Based on, and that's why we are so careful about who we take on, is because we have 100% guaranteed refund if you're not satisfied with our work. All you have to do at the end of 4 months is tell us you're not satisfied, and we'll completely refund you our 4-month service fee. So we take it very seriously about who we work with, because it pains us if we bring on the wrong person and we think we got some revenue. 4 months later, we're handing it back. That really hurts us. So we're really, really serious about who we bring on. yeah, so if you think that Amazon ads might be for you, we'll have a very honest conversation with you, and you'll at least know at what point will Amazon's ads make sense. And if we do think that your expectations are aligned with what we think we can deliver for your specific book, then we'll work with you. So that's why we do the 4-month minimum, and that's why we work the way we do.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Alex. Again, your website is getshelflife.com, and your email address is alex@getshelflife.com. They can email you to get a free copy, with shipping included, of Before the Bestseller, and to email you if they want to work with you.
Stephan, thank you so much for taking the time to have me on. As you know, I love to monologue about any and all things book marketing related. So really appreciate the chat.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and being an open book, so, pun intended. All right, awesome. Well, thank you, listener. Thank you, viewer. Make it a fantastic week. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.